In this video, we'll look at a small program that allows us to calculate the class average for a class of 10 students that took a particular exam. And basically, the program will allow the instructor to enter the grades, then we'll calculate the total of those grades and produce a class average. Now, in this example, we'll be using integer arithmetic, and as you'll see, in integer arithmetic, you always get an integer result. In the next example, we'll take a look at floating point arithmetic and also introduce Java's cast operator as well. So the main purpose of this example is to demonstrate the while repetition statement. In the next lesson, we'll be looking at a couple of other repetition statements, specifically the for repetition statement and the do while repetition statement. In addition, when we get to the arrays lesson, we'll take a look at the so-called enhanced for repetition statement, which is specifically for walking through a collection of elements, whether it be an array or an object called a collection in the Java programming language, and we'll talk about those features in later lessons. So this class average example is going to calculate the average for a class of 10 students. We know in advance exactly how many students there are, so we can use counter controlled repetition for that purpose. And as you can see here, my class average class consists of a big main method that starts at line 7 and ends at line 31. We once again create a scanner for reading input from the user, and notice at lines 10, 13, and 14 that each of these local variables in main that we're declaring is also initialized in its declaration, which is a good practice. That way you ensure that a variable has a value from the moment it's declared in the code. So the scanner called input is a new scanner object that's tied to the standard input stream. The integer called total is initialized to 0 because we have not read any grades yet, and the integer called grade counter is set to 1 to indicate that we're about to read the first grade. Now, while the grade counter is less than or equal to 10, we will perform the statements in the body of the loop. The while statement, just like the if and if-else statements, expects only one statement in its body. If you need to put more than one statement, you must represent the body as a set of curly braces containing the compound statement, if you will, the block of code. So the parentheses are required, and another requirement in Java is that the condition that you specify must result in a Boolean true or false value. So you can put in a condition that uses relational or equality operators to get a true or false value. As you'll learn in the next lesson, you can use logical operators to help you get a true or false value. You could also call a method that returns a Boolean true or false value in the condition as well. If you put anything inside of those parentheses that does not result in the values true or false, you will get a compilation error in Java. So that is a requirement of the language that's different from some of the other programming languages you may be familiar with. So every time through the loop, we'll prompt the user to enter a grade. We will read the grade as an integer, storing it in the local variable grade that's declared here in line 20. We will then add to the total the grade that was just input and store the result back in the total. And later in this lesson, we'll take a look at the shorthand way for writing an expression like the one that you see here with the same variable name on both sides of the assignment. And similarly at line 22, we increment the grade counter so that eventually this condition is going to become false and the loop will terminate. And later in this lesson, we'll take a look at the plus plus operator, which could be used to shorten this expression as well. So at line 26, once we get out of the loop, we calculate the average, and notice we're storing it in an integer. We have the int called total, which is divided by the literal 10, which is also considered to be an integer in Java. In fact, any numeric literal that's a whole number is by default considered to be an int. Any numeric literal with a decimal point in it by default is considered to be a double in the Java programming language. So total divided by 10, when you have an int divided by another int, you get an integer result. Therefore, if the value is has any floating point part to it, it is simply truncated. And so, for example, if I had a total of 846 for the 10 grades, the average would be 84.6 normally, but in this program it would come out as 84. In fact, we'll do precisely that when I run it for you in a moment. Now, once we've calculated the average, we then show you what the total of all the 10 grades is, and in this %d placeholder, we place the value of total. Remember that %n is your platform, cross-platform, Newline character. And then finally, we'll display the class average as an integer by placing the value of average into the %d placeholder. So let me go ahead and run this, and I'm going to enter in a bunch of grades here. So we'll do 10 of them because that's what's required of this particular example. Sorry that I can't type any faster. Okay, so I entered my 10 grades. You can see them here. And then at the end, we can see that the total was 84.6 and the resulting class average was 84. The 0.6 part was truncated because of the integer arithmetic. In the next example, we will also read in the grades as integers, but we'll show you how to perform a floating point calculation rather than an integer calculation.